What does it take to be a successful entrepreneur? A dangerous amount of coffee and a ton of grit. My name is Jason Tracy, and every week I interview business leaders to share their stories, life lessons, failures, and advice with you. Welcome to Coffee and Grit. I wouldn't expect any less than a roar than that, right?
It had to be there.
This team knows me. I love them. You know, I always know it's going to be a fun episode when we're like laughing and we're like been cracking up laughing here for the last 30 minutes getting ready. But I've known Natalie now for, it's been 4 years this month. Like we looked at the other day, 4 years as the 27th that I've known Natalie. And really she's been in my life even more than that. Just I didn't know it. Right. And so that's really cool how the world works. This episode is going to be a phenomenal episode for you if you are one of those dreamers, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're in the game and you've been told before that what you're doing isn't going to work. Maybe it's not the right time. Maybe you're doing something that is pioneering an idea that people in your community have never heard before, and the people around you are telling you maybe you should just give up. We're going to talk a lot about that. We're going to talk a lot about meager beginnings and just the consistency and a lot of perseverance. Natalie had me at hello from our very first conversation. So this was 4 years ago. I was speaking at an event. My friend Tress, who, I can't believe I've never had Tress on this. She's amazing too. But so speaking at this event with Tress, and Natalie comes up to me and she's like, "Hey, are you Gracie's husband?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And so she starts telling me this story because just within this last week, my wife had been in this group, unknown to me until this moment, with Natalie, Livingston Ladies at Lunch group. And she'd been in this group for a few years, and she was working at a car dealership at this time, and she couldn't get out to the lunch group, and she didn't have lunch for that day because she was planning on going out to this lunch, and Natalie had actually brought her lunch, and I remember it making her day. And so Natalie came up to me and she was like, "Yeah, I took her lunch the other day." So it was like, that is so awesome. But then as she was telling me what she did, she then said, and ended the conversation, "By the way, I'm opening up a collaborative workspace downtown Brighton." That had literally from day one of opening my business had been on my bucket list. Like, I had been a director of sales for a company. I had been traveling all over the state of Michigan. And the one thing I wanted more than anything was to be involved in my downtown, be a business downtown. But I didn't want to just necessarily have an office by myself. I wanted to be surrounded by other entrepreneurs, and there'd been other collaborative workspaces. In fact, that day that I met Natalie, I was out in a collaborative workspace out in Ann Arbor, and was like contemplating, do I come out here? I was like, I really don't want to drive. I want to be downtown. And Natalie's like, "Hey, I'm opening up a workspace that's, oh, by the way, a 3-minute walk from your house," and had me at hello. So we sat down after that event and probably had a 3-hour conversation. We do have the timer on this because we notoriously have 3-hour conversations. And that's just how we connected from day one. She then walked me over to her workspace that it was just an empty shell of a building at that point, and walked me through and shared with me her vision for this building. A few months later, she posted up on Facebook that it was the grand opening. And so I walked my happy ass down to the Grit Lavender and signed up. And I was actually really disappointed because there was one person there that was before me. But I am the longest member because that guy did not last. So it's consistency.
Yes. Yeah, you are. You're my longest standing member.
Longest standing. Gemini beat me in there. And I was like,
because he signed up online. Like, I hadn't even had a chance to put it out there yet. And he just went onto my webpage and signed up. So like there was no tour, there was no introduction to him. I was like, oh, look at that, I got a new member, and it's my first member. So Gemini snuck in, but
you're like, this online thing works.
Yeah, it did. and then you came, I think 2 weeks later. I didn't even have my certificate of occupancy yet. Like, I couldn't even do any business yet. And yeah, there was a handful of people that came in.
Posted on Facebook, today's the first day that I'm allowed to be open. Yeah. And I walked down. Me and Gracie had walked down, and we'd walked into the wrong building. We'd walked into the construction guys, Mitch Harris, and I was like walking upstairs and was like, I think I'm in the wrong building.
All right. Yeah. That's funny.
But it's been 4 years, and I was telling Grant before this, but Coffee and Grit is half your responsibility.
Where the
because
grit started, right?
It's where the grit started. For those that have seen the early episodes, that have been with me since the early episodes, or went back and checked them out, I started at Natalie's coffee table or kitchen table in the collaborative workspace there. And so when I was trying to think of a name of this thing I was launching, that who knew it was going to be 4 years or 3 years later, still rolling with this, like Coffee and Grit. That just makes
it also helps. I have good coffee, right? Like, you have good coffee. It does help that we have some good coffee, and then the grit side, like passion, perseverance for very long-term goals. And I think it kind of fit with what you were trying to accomplish too. And, we were all trying to navigate business and life and struggles and, celebrate positive, things going on in our worlds. And yeah, I think it fit really well. And here we are 4 years later after all that.
Well, and it fit with our journey too, because I think we were along the same route of like growing our businesses. And that's the other cool part about being part of of Grit and Lavender too, is there's been a lot of people in that building that I've watched go along that journey.
Yeah.
But you and I have been like
right there
lifting off, and it's so cool now to hear you say I'm running out of space.
Oh yeah. So I guess let me tell a little bit more of the story about like trust too, because there's a piece of it before you came into that I don't think we've kind of covered. And I think it's important because, at that time, so for those that don't know, I'm a financial planner by trade. So I had worked in the financial industry for a long time and mainly in the banks. So like JP Morgan, Merrill Lynch, PNC. My last stop was at a place called Insight Financial in Ann Arbor. And the people there are awesome. They're amazing. But there were some things with how the like corporate structure wouldn't allow me to charge the way I wanted to charge. And so I knew that wasn't going to be a good fit. And then I also realized that the person that had owned that business for the past 30 years, like he had a different vision than I had. And so that's what kind of prompted me to look for my own shop, my own four walls, just me, right? But even before that, so I'm kind of getting into Insight and I'm getting trained and I met Doug Moffett, who also was a part. So the independent Insight Financial, they had a broker dealer of Mass Mutual, and Doug Moffett was also a part of that. And so I ended up running into Doug at a couple of spots over a few week period, including a Mass Mutual event. And he says, "Hey, I've got this coaching thing I'm doing at a seminar. I'd really like you to come, please come." And so I did. And I'm there and I'm just kind of like getting settled in. I don't really know many people in the room. And all of a sudden Tress walks in. And to give some more story about Tress, I used to babysit Tress, and like she was in middle school and I was in high school, or even me being in middle school and younger. So I hadn't seen Tress for 15 years. And here's this girl walking in the door at Doug Moffett's, event. And what was interesting is then we got talking. Obviously, we connected that day, and then we went out for lunch, and then we figured out that both of our husbands work at the same union hall, and they're both instructors, and they know each other. We didn't know that, right? Here's this person that was part of my life 15 years ago, and our husbands are working together in the same shop. Like they're both union plumbers, and her husband, he's a welder, and my husband's a medical gas instructor. And so like it was just kind of interesting to see that connection. And so we reconnected, and she was the one that told me about that speaking engagement that you were speaking at as well. And she's like, "Hey, I'd love it if you'd come and support me." And so I'm sitting next to like Brandon and hanging out. And I was like, "Oh yeah, Jason, I know his wife. I've been doing these ladies' lunches." And by the way, those ladies' lunches started because I had just taken the layoff from JP Morgan, and I needed some more professional interaction. I needed some people around me, because staying in my office all day studying for that certified financial planner exam was not an easy thing to do. And I needed some people that were not like, so not only was I studying for the certified financial planner exam, my daughter was really struggling with some developmental delays. And so I had a lot of that kind of stuff going on. And so it was like studying and momming and trying to make it all work. And I needed some other people that I could just, go out to lunch and not have to worry about all that for a minute.
I couldn't picture you belong in the wild. I couldn't picture you being caged by the four walls and having people around you. Yeah.
Just because it was upstairs in my office, right? Yeah. So like I would take Lillian to daycare and I would be at the house and it would just study for 8 to 10 hours a day. And I'm not that good. Like I can't do that. So that's how I met Gracie. And so I had known her, and the day that like she needed lunch, she had, she worked in car sales, and when you're in sales, you get an opportunity to walk in the door. Like you got to take it. You got to go sell, right? Like you got to go take care of the client that's walking in the door. And so the heck that you had lunch for the day is planned, like you got to make the sale. And so I know that about sales. And so that was really important. Like, I'm just going to buy her a club sandwich. Like, I don't even know if she likes club sandwiches, but here we are. I'm going to buy her this club sandwich, drop it off to her. Cause I'm sure like after you close that sale, you're going to be starving, especially cause you're planning on going out for lunch. Right. So nobody prompted me. I didn't ask her what she wanted. I just walked it in the door to the dealership and said, hey, here you go. I figured you might be hungry. And I think that was super impactful because I think she had come to your house afterwards and was like, oh, Natalie brought me a sandwich. It was so nice. Right.
Yeah.
And then here I am, a week or two later, walking into the speaking event with you and Tress and Maria Sylvester and saying, hey, by the way, I'm Natalie. And you're like, oh, you're the Natalie who brought Gracie a sandwich, right?
Yeah.
And so anyway, so that led how you and I had met. And I just think it's important to acknowledge, like, sometimes you don't know who you're going to meet, like, on your journey, right? I didn't know that by joining Insight Financial and meeting Doug Moffitt and attending his thing would then reconnect me with a friend from 15 years prior that, by the way, our husbands work together. And then, by the way, when she's speaking and going through this thing, you're going to meet somebody else that connects to your network that you've never met. And oh, by the way, Jason was just sitting at a co-working space saying, man, I wish there was something like this in Brighton. And then 3 hours later, you meet me and I'm like, oh, I'm thinking about doing this thing. Like, I just signed my lease for 2,500 square feet in downtown Brighton to create a collaborative workspace. And so sometimes I think there's a few things here, like what's meant for you won't miss you.
Yep.
So like I was really trying to find my path at this time in my financial industry world. And I knew that other professionals needed a good spot to work. Like they wanted the tech, they wanted it to be plug and play. They needed to have the security features. They needed to have shredding. They needed that professional space. And this is 2019. Like this is before COVID, right? Like COVID was not on our radar at all.
Yeah.
And so the idea of having a collaborative workspace or like a co-working space, many people didn't know what that meant or what that was. And I'm like, man, I just can't be the only person that needs this in a professional setting, but doesn't need it full time. I don't need a 7 to 10 year lease. I don't need, even 1,000 square feet or 100 square feet is all I really need, just my own 4 walls. And so it kind of developed in that way. And I felt like starting it from the point of like what I needed and what was important to me was a good starting point. So when you walk into my office, it's basically me and a brand, right? Like, let's just be honest. Like, I didn't want your mahogany desks that you typically get in a financial advisor office. And I wanted it to be comfortable. I wanted people to have everything they need. And so like the little nuances of like, we have notebooks for you to be able to grab. We have the phone chargers and like, what do you need for the day? And we probably have it on site available for you to use.
Coffee, as you mentioned.
Coffee and like paying for the higher end coffee, right? Like paying for the coffee that can be customized and it's kind of like choose your journey, right? Like, do you want to sit at the table and do a podcast, or do you need a meeting room, or do you need it for a mediation because there's something else going on? And so we have a pretty wide range, but the reality is that the people that are coming into the space are all doing their own thing, but they want to be around other people. They also know that typically they're not doing well in their own 4 walls in their own house. And so it's interesting to see how that's kind of come full circle now. But when we started out, to be able to say like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. Let me put the time frame in perspective. Like I resigned from Insight Financial June 4th. I toured the building on June 7th. I signed the lease June 18th. I met you June 27th, right? And my lease started July 1st. And in that time frame, at the time, like just to order any furniture was going to take 6 to 8 weeks. And I had ordered some prior to officially getting into the building. And I was ready to open mid-August, but I had to wait on the city's certificate of occupancy, which delayed me a couple more weeks. So we officially opened September 20th of 2019. And so it's just interesting, like all of those pieces fell into place so quickly. Like the contractors came in, all the different things, the furniture arrived. My husband built me 10,000 pounds of furniture on like a dime while he's working a 40-hour week. Like I remember Lillian, we have a picture of Lillian like in like a diaper at the time with no clothes on because we had lost power because it was so like we had a storm and one of the electrical wires caught on fire and so we had no power. And so I have like Lillian climbing on boxes shirtless and nothing but a diaper like as we're trying to build all the furniture. And so it's kind of interesting to like look back at that time frame now. Here we are 4 years later and being like, hey, honey, I know you've never worked in the office, like in an office setting because he's a plumber, he's always out in the field. But being able to like come in and say, what do you want to do? You need me to build how much furniture? It's all IKEA furniture at that. Like, not all of it, but just it's like, okay, let's do it. Right. Like, you seem passionate about it. I'm going to support you through this, and okay, let's go. And so then to be open in September was like an interesting time frame, because little did I know COVID was going to come 6 months later.
Yeah.
And like, I'm just starting to like bring a few new members in. February 20th of 2020, or February of 2020 was the time that all of a sudden, like, I'm finally covering my rent. I'm finally covering all my like furnishing and equipment payments. And I'm finally like, great, like this is actually going to probably work.
Yeah.
And that was February of 2020. And then a couple weeks later? Yeah, we had some interesting conversations around that time too. But like,
whenever deeply, it was like it was starting to cruise. And then, we look back now, and obviously 2020, COVID was a good thing for the industry.
But at that
moment, at the time, you weren't looking at it like, oh, we're going to do, this is easy sailing.
No, at the time, like, so March was okay, but then April, I had lost 70% of my revenue that I had just gotten. And so I'm like, oh crap, I don't know how this is going to play out. My husband's now laid off because everything was shut down. I no longer have daycare for my daughter. And so like trying to navigate all those things, like it made me put my money where my mouth was, right? Because I was saying Grit and Lavender, and it really tested that grit, that perseverance to see like, are you going to go and fold and like crawl in a corner and not do anything during the shutdown of COVID? Or are you going to actually try and figure this out? And so repositioning the business, bringing in new members in a different way, different ways to work together, doing all of the COVID protocol type stuff and navigating that was really like, there's a lot of late nights involved with trying to navigate that in the beginning. But then by November of 2020, after repositioning everything, we had recovered that lost revenue. And then since then, we've been growing at like around 40 to 60% a year clip since then, which is pretty freaking amazing. Considering how my industry is kind of setting up, like I'm doing much better than typical industry standards. But I'm a micro space, like, again, why I'm running out of, space. And we have room that people can kind of fill in at like those little time slots that are available. But then we do have our members that use the space pretty regularly. And so it's just kind of having the conversation of like, what do you need? What space can fit and what can work for you? And then we just kind of customize what that looks like for people. And that's what I think, that ability to like navigate, well, what do you need? And then how can I help serve you? And so leading with service has been a good, I don't want to say sales tactic, but like it's a good way of doing business.
Good way of doing business. That's exactly it.
Yeah. And so it's been an interesting journey and like growing and adapting. And then there's been redoing like other iterations of the business. I think I've revamped the business now a good 3 times, probably closer to 4, depending on if you want to consider, some of it adapting or not. But reevaluating how things are going periodically and checking in with your members, checking in with the people around you and like, where are you struggling? What's not working? And then also saying like, I'm sorry when something doesn't go as planned, right? There's going to be stuff that messes up. And part of it for me is like owning it. Like, that sucks. I'm sorry. Like, I didn't mean that to turn out the way it did. So how do we make it up to you? How do we fix it from going forward? And taking ownership of some of those things, I think also really helps. And I think, if you look at your like WeWork and your Regis and the bigger commercial spaces that are around, I don't think they necessarily have that attention to detail. I don't think they have that attention of like, well, this is what our policy is. People are not always empowered to be able to take action and understand what's going on. And that's really, really, really try to, I guess, beat the market or beat the other people in terms of customer service and understanding what they need and making it seriously plug and play. Like,
it was important to building the community.
Yeah.
And it speaks for the community that we have.
Totally. Completely. I think the people that we have around here are amazing. And I think sometimes we know that we want connection. We know that we want authenticity. We know we want collaboration.
Yeah.
But it's not always like, outside of networking events, where do you really get that? Like, the networking events are great to like meet somebody and have a conversation, be like, oh, I like you. Like, you're my kind of person. But where do you actually like build those relationships? You can do it in coffee shops to a certain extent, but like Like one of the people I had stolen out of Panera, he's trying to close $5 million deals for his company, and he's doing it in Panera with a kid screaming in the background. Like, not the best look. And so I stole him from Panera and brought him into the office, and he was one of my first members as well. Like, no, if you're trying to close $5 million deals, like,
I love that guy.
Do you remember Stu?
Yeah, Stu, yeah.
Yeah, and so it was like, no, if you're trying to
the
close.
Accent, like Stu, if you can come back and just talk every once in a while.
So for a minute there, I was talking about how we had like the British invasion because we had Stu, we have SA Partners, and then we have Chris with Spartan Light Metal Products, and so because so it's like I have all these Brits that are in our office, and they're a lot of fun. And, I love having the variety of people around, different aspects. We have Nelly that's from Bulgaria. We had Gemini was from the Philippines. Yeah. Right? Like the diversity of the people that are in the space as well.
I ended up doing business in the Philippines, which was crazy. Yeah. It was really cool, really different because of the connection with Gemini.
Right.
Exactly. There's been several people that I've had as guests. Recently, Mary Vance.
Yep.
Jen McClure. We talked about Jen McClure. That was one that for 2 years, seeing her in the office, I'd be like, when are you going to be on? When are you going to be on? You've been a 3-year battle, since day one. But.
Yeah, I know. It wasn't necessarily intentional. I'm just like, well, I don't know what to talk about. Like, we talk all the time, but I'm like, I don't know what I'm bringing to the table in terms of our podcast. Like I'm going through it. It really, if I look at the past 4 years, like I don't know what words of wisdom I have to share with other people, right? Like so,
you're doing pretty good so far.
I know. it comes naturally. Like, but it's the thing. You see me as like this person, like, man, Natalie's got all this like crazy cool insight because you know me, but I'm not seeing it as like, well, who's going to listen to it on Jason's podcast? So it's like, I don't know if it's imposter syndrome, but some of that kind of coming up of like, I don't know what to talk about. I'm still trying to make my business work. I don't know that it's successful yet. I'm paying my bills, but like, is it considered successful? I don't know. There's been a lot of nonsense that's happened in the past 3-4 years. And also on top of that, like even just trying to navigate my financial planning practice along these things and trying to figure out what that looks like that didn't really get started. So my financial planning practice was registered February 10th of 2020. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't even take on my first client until 2021. And trying to navigate that. And then I'm trying to fit round peg in a square hole with the financial planning practice because of who my niche is and what traditional wealth management looks like. And I'm like, well, this doesn't work. And so now I'm going through another iteration of that and focusing more on education and people getting the resources and supporting them as they're doing it themselves because people have knowledge and they can get information super easy now, but they want to get some help with somebody that can understand what they're talking about, apply it to their situation, and help them make good, educated decisions along the way. And so, like, even changing the financial planning practice, like, that's going through its own transition and journey, focusing on that.
Before we get back at it, a quick shout out for our sponsor, Playbook Builder, powered by AI. This show has always been about giving the resources and the tools to small business owners in order to grow and scale your businesses successfully. And so I'm so excited to partner with a company that does just that. If you've listened and heard any of our guests, you've heard talking about building process, developing and training, building culture, are all such important pieces in order to building a great company. Well, Playbook Builder, powered by AI, has come along and revolutionized the game on how you can do that for your team and people. Whether you're onboarding new people, training and developing, continued training and developing, you're looking to scale your business or eventually sell, or most importantly, you're looking to build a legacy as a visionary. Playbook Builder, powered by AI, is able to solve those problems for you. For me, as a consultant, I've been able to plug in, and it's so amazing for what I do for clients. I can now leave a legacy. And so, for example, I'm next week training a new hire for a company, and I've been able to build out the next month of her training program using Playbook Builder, powered by AI. The cool thing about the AI, what does that do? What's the hardest part of building out a process? Taking this step by step and making it easy to learn. What the AI piece does is you can actually type in what process it is, whether you want to onboard, if you want to onboard a new employee, type in onboard a new employee and what type of industry you're in, and the AI will put together a a foundation for you to build out your playbook. It is absolutely incredible. But don't take my word for it. Head on over to playbookbuilder.com, and these guys have set it up to where you can take this for a test run with no obligations. Plug in what kind of playbook you want to build. If it's a sales training playbook, for example, plug that in the description. And in the description, you can also put in what kind of industry you're in, and then hit generate, and it will generate a playbook for you. Impress from there, and you can take a 30-day free trial of the playbook system altogether. The consistent message that I give to people is we're either winning or learning. And there's a whole lot in all of that. It's been a whole lot of learning. And then, and I think there's several things that we've even talked about to this point, but even just the connections. I forgot that Doug Moffat was a part of that story.
Yeah.
And wasn't Doug's dad connected?
Okay, yes. So even before, so there's Doug Moffat, and then there's Doug Miller, who's my husband. And my husband had his own plumbing company back in 2009. So this actually roots back even further than that, because I'd forgotten about that. Doug Moffat. So Don Moffat is Doug Moffat's dad, and my husband Doug and Don Moffat, Doug Moffat's dad, used to be in like a BNI networking group. And so Doug knew Don from like this BNI networking group from like 2009, 2010. And oh man, this is even funnier, because then I didn't find this out till later on. But so Don was a financial advisor working at Insight Financial.
Yeah.
Don ended up having a health event of some sort that he ended up passing away from. And so my husband, so Doug Moffat's stepmom, ended up doing some plumbing for, I don't know her name, but Mrs. Moffat, let's say, Doug Moffat's stepmom. And so Doug had done plumbing for Don when he was alive, and then did more plumbing for the stepmom. And so when I connected with Doug Moffat, I was like, by the way, I noticed that you are a financial planner, and I'm very curious to find out more, because I recognize the name because my husband. He's like, yeah, I also was interested in talking to you because you're at Insight Financial, which is where my dad worked before he passed away. So it was kind of like this funny little thing in terms of just like we both wanted to reach out to each other.
Yeah.
Because we had these little funny connections. Like I had known Don Moffat, and I knew that story, and I knew that he had passed away, and then Doug had helped out, his wife, and that he had done all of that. And here I am talking to Doug Moffat and realizing, oh, by the way, like there's another connection here. And he's like, oh no, Don worked at Insight Financial.
Yep.
And that's where I was working at that moment. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. Like, how much of a coincidence is that? And then that led to more conversations with Doug, that led me to that event, that led me to trust, that like, so
it's the learning in that. It's the stories in that. And you said a little bit ago, or you said at the beginning when you were telling the story about Doug, as far as like who knew when I went to a Doug Moffat event that I'd meet these people. One, if you're doing anything with Doug Moffat, you're probably going to meet some people. And I've told Doug's been on Coffee and Grit back when it was at Grit, at your place. And, and then the other thing is I just recently told a story about how this crazy connection of just, it's a crazy story. It probably took up like a 15-minute story in a solo episode I did about just how the world is connected. But when you go out, you have no idea how the world is connected. Nope. But when you meet the right people, it just kind of unfolds that way. Yeah. And we've had these things, and there was one just last summer that I had a connection with, and you knew about this because we're talking about 2020. I'm in the office, like trying to figure out how the hell I'm growing my business, and I'm pouring into LinkedIn. I met this group of people on LinkedIn. I told you about this group of people all the time that I was like, I'm learning from these people how to grow my influence on LinkedIn. And in one of them last summer was like, in Arizona, Tisha Marie Pelletier, she was like, I'm coming to Brighton. I have a client in Brighton. Yeah. And I'm like, that's amazing. So she organized this whole get together at the Pound. And so I'm excited because I'm going to meet Tisha, but there's also other people that I didn't even know were in Michigan that I've been connected with on LinkedIn. That I'm like, I've wanted to meet for a long time. And I'm like, wow, Tisha's bringing all these people to the Pound. And then I walk in and you're sitting at the table and I'm like, what the hell?
So there was that was Raul's. Yeah. Raul Verduzco's introduction. So he had come by. So Raul and I were talking, and he was just becoming like a mail service member of the office. And he's like, hey, I got this guy. He's coming into town. I want to show him the space. We want to come meet you. And then he says, why don't you come join us for some networking at the Pound? Like we're this, these group of people are coming into town and come. And then I didn't know that there was a connection with you. Yeah. And I was like, oh, look at you. And so that was kind of funny one. There's other little like silly ones. So when I was building out the office, so I was setting up with Comcast, and Comcast sent out these tech contractors. And so they sent out Fly Consulting, which Denton Fairley is the owner there. And, the typical Michigan conversation of like, hey, I'm going up north for the week. It's like, oh, where are you going? Oh, I'm going up to Hale. I have this little cottage up there. And he says, man, I think we used to go up to Hale when we were kids. I think we used to have a cottage up there. So he went home that night and asked his mom, like, hey, where was that cottage? He says it was on Dease Lake. And it was funny because Denton was like, well, this one, she's a part of some club, the Fireman's Cottage or something. She's like, yeah, our cottage was right next to the Fireman's Cottage. And Denton's about 10 years younger than me. So I'm thinking of like this time frame. Like I remember there being a kid next door playing in the lake next to us. But I was a teenager with like 19, 20 years old with my friends, probably doing things that were not appropriate for a 10-year-old. And so it was funny because then there's a connection there. And then Denton and I are talking like a week or so later, and I'm working with Andrew Seo, who's my insurance guy, and he's coming to help me get everything set up, right? And so Andrew Seo walks in and find out that Denton and Andrew Seo know each other from like somehow, I think it was through church or something like that. So they knew each other, and it was like, okay, well, that's interesting. And then fast forward, Jeff Tenbrook. So you know who Jeff Tenbrook is?
I remember that. I was thinking the story because Gracie was in the office at that time. When he saw some dude that he played soccer with or something. So
SA Partners, Matt, Scott, and Jeff Tenbrook used to play soccer together. Yeah. And so it was just kind of like there's all these, and then here's another.
Because Jeff was there meeting me that day.
Yeah.
And then he left, and just crazy.
And so then we have Jeff and Matt, and then Andrew Seo, who I mentioned before. Carolyn, so now we have a community manager, Carolyn, and she had come in and she said, Seo, I knew a Seo. Come to find out, back in the 90s, I think it was her dad that was sick. Andrew's aunt used to take care of Carolyn's dad when he was sick and like be a caregiver for him. So she knew. She's like, and that's, so it was just kind of like another funny thing, like those 6 degrees of separation. It's funny how that kind of comes up. And when you have a space like this, like Grit Lavender, where people come in, you kind of get to talk and you get to know each other and like, oh, actually we do have this connection. Actually, we do know each other here. Yep. Or it's funny how we've crossed paths. And my mother-in-law used to say something that used to piss me off a lot. She used to say, what's meant for you won't miss you. And I think that's interesting because if I was meant to do something other than what I'm doing, I remember saying before I even thought of the office space, I was kind of having like a dream basically of like, man, I don't know what it is, but I keep seeing this collaborative workspace come up in my head. I hadn't even resigned from Insight Financial. This is like mid-May. And I said, I don't know what it is, but I'll figure it out later. But I had said it to my mother-in-law, like, I keep seeing this collaborative workspace, but I don't know what that means yet. And sure enough, 3 weeks later, I'm touring an office space and checking it out. And I remember Farrah and Scott coming with me that day to like sign the lease. And it's just kind of like, wow, how do these things kind of come up? And and I used to hate it when somebody would say like, what's meant for you won't miss you, because you want these things to happen so bad sometimes. And it just wasn't the right time. I wanted to be successful as an advisor working at all these other places for 3 years. I bounced around for 3 years. And it wasn't until I finally got into my own space in a place that I felt comfortable, that I could navigate my life as a mom, as a professional, as a way that I can help my clients in the way that I was kind of being told you can't do that. Yeah. You can't serve people that work in the skilled trades. They don't invest. They don't have any money. Well, I know from my experience working in construction and being married to the industry that they do have money. They just don't know what this crazy thing called the stock market is and why it makes sense for them to invest, because they would much rather buy a half a cow because they can know they can feed their family for the wintertime when they're going to go through a layoff, let alone some crazy stock market thing that they don't understand how it works. And they know it can go up and it can go down. And they know that there's going to be meat in their freezer instead if they just buy the half a cow. So you just have to change the conversation with them and come to those people and meet them where they are to help add value. But after being told by my industry, don't serve them, you're wasting your time. Well, the reality is that they need help. They have complexities. They have things that they need help with. And if you look at their income, like the traditional corporate, like investment firm was telling me, well, go after the teachers, go after this. And I'm like, well, the teachers are making maybe $100,000 combined, maybe 120 at the most. And here I am working with somebody in the skilled trades making $120,000 to $200,000 a year plus a working spouse. So we're at $200,000 to $300,000 of household income. So you're telling me to focus on the people that are making a lot less money, have a lot less disposable income, and you're telling me not to focus on the people that are making that much more. They just have complexity.
Yeah.
And so I guess my point to this is that, like, you don't know what's going to come for you. You don't know where things are going to take you. And it's the journey, the learning, the experiences, the connections that come along the way that, like, in hindsight, you can see where that was meant for me, right? Like, that was important. That was impactful. Because if you don't have the journey, it's really hard to, like, put the pieces together. And the disappointments that come, the things that you think are missing you, they weren't meant for you at that time. They weren't the right path. It wasn't the right time for me working for somebody else because I had a different vision. I had a different passion. I had a different way of wanting to work with people. And I wasn't going to be able to change that visionary's mind. And so there couldn't be more than one visionary in that same company. And I had a different vision and I was going to go pursue it. And they're great. They're doing excellent. I think the work that they were doing, they're good guys. They're a great firm, but I wanted to do things differently. And it was kind of taking the risk to go and do it on my own. And it's scary when you do that, right?
But it goes back, and I said this earlier, it's like you belong in the wild.
Correct.
You belong in the wild. One, going into your holster, you've been a survivor
your
whole life, right?
Correct.
And so it plays into that.
Correct.
But the other thing, and it's funny, through our whole relationship, I'm like, you have the passion for the finance thing. Like, good for you. Because I told, we were joking around. I'm like, that stuff makes me think, like, when I look at my to-do items, I'm like, it could always be worse. I could be doing like the compliance shit that Natalie's doing, right? And then you have this thing to me that's like so exciting, and the workspace.
Office,
but it also, that to me is like like one of your purposes. You're a connector. You're a community builder.
And that's the thing that I think is interesting. People, like, especially in both industries, like, I get told a lot, you have to choose one. You can't do office and financial planning. I'm like, okay, I've been told these things before of, like, you can't do something.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't think these people see how I see these things marrying up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
yep.
Like, the office space is, like, take one away from the other, and to me, there's always going to be a gap, right? Like, my big vision for where I'm taking the office space is much grander than probably what most people realize. But, like, to be able to have a space that can promote collaboration and education and connection for people on a broader scale, not just my 2,500 square feet in Brighton, but on a much larger scale, doing some things virtually, doing some things with a much larger location. But it's that ability to say, hey, I'm going to have this community of people that are around, and that community of people, they're going to need help navigating this stuff.
Yeah.
Right? But think back about the PPP loan,
Yeah,
right? Like, that kind of stuff. Like,
oh my God, yeah.
I'm doing the research, and it's like, oh, hey, Jason, by the way, do you know that you qualify for, like, this 10 grand grant right here? Like, apply.
Yeah.
You should apply. I didn't qualify, but, like, just because I didn't qualify, why wouldn't I share that with you?
And it was a dramatic difference obviously at that time.
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing, is that we have a tendency to forget, like, we're doing the good work, and just because it doesn't work out for me, why can't I share it? Like, leading with the abundance mindset for me was super important. There's plenty of work to go around. Looking downtown, there's 1 million of us advisors, right? And how do we differentiate ourselves? And, you know, if you want the best portfolio or somebody to sell you something that, you know, that has a mahogany desk and looks really fancy and sharp because you think that's what's needed, they're probably not going to be my clients. There's going to be a fit for them, right?
Yeah.
I came from JP Morgan, from the private bank. I've worked with clients with 20 to 50 million in investable assets. Like, I've worked with some really, really prominent household names that people would be familiar with, and I can play in that space. They're not my people. I'm the daughter of a handyman. I'm the wife of a plumber. I worked in construction, you know, to put myself through college. And just because I can play in that space doesn't mean that that's where I want to live every day, because I can make a bigger impact working with these people that I feel like are being underserved. And the heck with what the industry says I need to do, right? And so I feel like I'm
Absolutely.
very much going against the grain. And when you go against the grain, there's a lot of stuff that comes in that is challenging. Like, so again, eating my words with the grit, if you're going to go against the grain, you're going to get your butt knocked down a whole mess of times, and you're going to have to dust yourself off and continuously try. And I feel like that's kind of been a mantra of my life, is I have been knocked down so many times where people would count me as being down and out. Like I wouldn't be getting back up. And somehow it might take me a little while. I might have to like take a couple breaths while I'm down there, right? But I have a tendency to continuously get back up and continuously move forward and continuously try. And I'm going to fail, right? And failing is okay. I feel like we shy away from failure, but the reality is that failure is the teacher. And also sometimes it's learning from other people's failures or something that doesn't work well, but mainly it's my own. Like if I fail a client, meaning like I didn't do what I was going to say I was doing at this time, right? Like I'm like, okay, well, how do I systemize something or like put a process in so I don't do that again, right? Like, or so that I don't drop the ball here. How do I get better help and support, right? And of course, taking ownership. Like I messed up and I'm sorry for that. Like that was my fault. Like let's figure out how to fix this together. What would make it up to you? And instead of just like not having those tough conversations, I think sometimes having the tough conversations are the thing that helps us move forward and also reminds people that we're human. Reminds us we're human, reminds us that, like, I'm going to go to bat for you. I'm going to mess up sometimes. I'm not going to be perfect. If you want a perfect advisor, go find the guy with the mahogany desk because he's going to tell you he's perfect all the time. Mm-hmm. And the reality is that he's not. He's just showing you that he's perfect all the time. Stereotypically he. But the reality is that, like, most people, I think, want somebody to be like, here's what's going on. Here's my education. Here's what I know about your situation. Here's the emotional piece. Here's why you're making these decisions when it comes to your money. Here's why you're making these choices when it comes to your business. Here's what's not being fulfilled in your business and your practice. How do we go and look at things in a different way? Look outside the box, fail, try again, fail again, continuously adapt, and keep pursuing that lifestyle that you want or that business that you want or the schedule that you want. Sometimes it's just a schedule thing, right?
Yep.
And continuously pursue that and see where life takes you, because it will be super impactful.
I love, first off, I love when people say, I have no idea what I'm going to talk about or what kind of value I provide. And then you like, this is it, right? Like it's that lived experience, because there are other people going through what you've gone through, or, you know, that want to go through it, and they got to hear, they got to hear it. Right.
Yeah.
And you talk about going against the grain, you know, it's and then learning from the lessons. What's cool is, like, going through this, I've seen you adjust. I've seen you learn. I've seen you like
fall flat on my face and be a mess.
I've seen you fall flat on your face and be a mess, but I've seen you like get back up, and figure it out. And it's never been like all of a sudden you've reinvented. Now there's a grand circus in the lobby, or there's like, you know, you're a visionary to the visionary degree.
Yes, I am.
Awesome shout out for Carolyn, because Carolyn's come along.
This machine does not work without Carolyn. Carolyn, she likes to call herself the fun governor and the funds governor, because she knows that, like, don't leave me to my own devices, because I think what happens is, like, one of the interesting realizations for me is how much ADHD, which I finally got a diagnosis last summer, but like the ADHD part for me explained so much more from my history, like the past.
Yeah.
It gave me better context. It helped me change that, you know, that story that we all have in our head.
Yep.
It allowed me to look at that from a different view or a different light, and give myself some grace and some compassion for those times where I was like, well, I'm just a crappy math student. Here, sitting here as a financial advisor and saying, like, I'm a super crappy algebra student. Like, I think I've showed you my CFP, like, formula sheet. That's all algebra. Now, the reality is that we use calculators in the exam. We don't actually have to do the longhand algebra. But it's super intimidating, right? And I just had this story in my head that I'm a crappy math student and that it doesn't sink in well. And then now that I had the ADHD diagnosis, it was like, well, what was happening was they would go through the problems, let's say in class, like you're learning an algebra project or problem, and they teach you steps 1 through 3 in the first day. And the next day, they don't review steps 1 through 3. They expect you to remember it, and they're starting at 4, 5, and 6. And the problem with me in high school, especially with algebra, was that I forgot what steps 1, 2, and 3 were. Yeah. I don't remember. And so unless you show me again the next day, I don't remember. It's not there. It is gone. And so giving myself some grace to say, okay, well, I have to do steps 1, 2, and 3. And then I have to do steps 4, 5, and 6 to even remotely get to the close answer. And the teaching environment wasn't allowing for that very well. But again, we didn't have any knowledge or resources or anything to tell me like, hey, Natalie needs extra help and support. So like no fault of the teachers. We just didn't know. And nobody was aware that I wasn't getting it, right? Yep. But now looking at that, like when I was in college, that was in high school that this kind of started. And then when I was in college, taking my algebra class for the 3rd time, I had to come home every single night and start step 1 through 3, 4, 5, and 6, and then do it again and do it again and do it again. And it was funny because I was dating Doug at the time. And I remember saying to him, I have to do my math homework for the next hour and a half before I can go and like play or watch a movie or like do whatever we were going to do. Like, no. And he would sit there and he'd hold me to it. Like, no, you have a 90-minute session of your math homework. Like do your 50 problems and then we can go and do whatever. We can go out to dinner or whatever. But like until I got that repetition, it was a big challenge. And so now here I am as a business owner trying to, again, deal with ADHD. And now as a parent and all the constant shifting of stuff and being a business owner, things don't stay the same. And so trying to figure out the right systems and processes and things to help me navigate that. And Carolyn is the glue that holds that together for me. Without her, I could not do what I'm doing. Like she keeps me on task. Now, granted, she thinks that I blow her off sometimes. I don't blow her off. I just am like, oh, this, which it allows me to be this amazing visionary. Yeah. The ADHD allows me to see things and put them together so much faster than other people. But to somebody that doesn't have ADHD, they can't keep up. They're like, oh, you're all over the place. I'm like, yeah, but you can't see all the steps that I'm seeing, right? And so without her, I don't think that the machine would run as well as it does, nor would it have allowed for as much growth, right? Like she is the first step of many steps that need to come to build this business, this community up the way I want to build it. But it's got to start somewhere, and having those implementers around you that help take the things that are not the highest and best use off your time, take those things off your plate, allow you to do the things that make you great. I'm great in front of people. I'm great in front of like doing the business planning. I'm great in terms of creating ideas that are outside the box. Don't stick me in, well, sometimes, but like, don't stick me in this thing where I have to just do like a project where it's mundane and I don't like compliance. Yeah. I don't want to do it. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Like that's not fun. There's no dopamine like dump on compliance. Right. Like, except for when I get it done, but like, I want to go chase the dopamine. Yes. Like, let's go chase this because this is a fun and exciting thing, and watch, we will create something amazing. But I don't want to do some of the other basic stuff on a day-to-day basis. And so that's been an interesting part of my journey over the past really 12 months of like understanding how my brain works, understanding the things that are the good uses of my time, the things that are not good uses of my time, the things that cause me to kind of like, I don't want to say go down a rabbit hole because sometimes a rabbit hole's good, but like sometimes it's like, okay, I've processed the same thing 3 times and I don't know how to put it into a system so I don't have to process it again, right? Yeah, so that's kind of part of the journey, and that's the learning experience. And I'll say, when looking back on the ADHD side of things, that has been something that has really taught me the grit, right? Like, because I fail all the time. Like I have face planted so many times on so many things. And sometimes it's like, you know, being a spouse, being a mom, being an entrepreneur, being a salesperson, like, oh, well, that was dumb. Especially talking to a sales coach, like, you know, I've talked to Jason about doing something dumb like this, and like, kind of like, why do people do this? And then I turn around like 2 weeks later, I do the same thing, and I'm like, darn it. Why did I do that? And it's just, you know, it's also giving yourself grace to know that like you're going to fail and you're going to do some dumb stuff that you've said you're not going to do. And then here you are like, oh, I was just, you know, kind of complaining about how people do these stupid things. And here you are doing the stupid thing. So it's kind of, like I said, giving yourself the grace of like, okay,
give yourself the grace. But like, again, you're just like, I love how you said like I face planted so many times.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
It doesn't hurt, you know, probably
it hurts.
It hurts. But you're just kind of used to it and you're used to picking yourself back up.
Yeah. I mean, it hurts, but like, my husband has a funny story around this, but when he was a kid, he fell off of a, like, not very high, but like a balcony at like the Miller's, like a Miller event. And he kind of fell, he was like 3 or 5 or something. And he fell off of it and he just got back up, started walking. And they said, oh yeah, he bounces good. Right. So it's like same kind of thing. Like I bounce good. Right. Like I'm going to fall on my face, but like, oh, that hurts. That sucks. You might be a little bloody, a little bit bruised, but like you'll clean yourself up. You'll try and bandage the spots that are kind of wounded or hurt. Sometimes it's your ego. Sometimes it's your finances. Like I pay a lot of stupid tax, by the way. Like I do. Things that you don't know. And so, but that's part of the learning process. It's like, no, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to be in action about whatever I'm doing. And being in action sometimes causes you to pay some stupid tax, right? Like you're going to take a risk or make a choice and, well, that was dumb, right? Like my key fob system. I didn't know that there were key fob systems out in the world that actually integrated with the software that we use to like manage the access into space.
Yeah.
But I already spent $6,000 to $8,000 on doing that, and I wasn't going to spend another $6,000 to $8,000. Like I got to suck it up and deal with what I have. And so
at that beginning when you're just like you've never opened a space before.
I didn't even expect to be in the co-working industry. I didn't know that there was a co-working industry like world. And I just thought
that's the whole thing is like you said you had a vision for the co-working space, but at the same time
there's
you went on a
industry
journey to be a financial planner or to have your own financial, and like all of a sudden you had this co-working space and you're running 2 businesses at one time.
Yeah, which is another, and then doing that through COVID, like all of a sudden not having any childcare and like doing a year of virtual junior kindergarten, like Lillian learning her ABCs on an iPad. And so thank God I had my mother-in-law that was able to come and help like 2 days a week or sometimes 3 days a week. And then I would cover the other 2 or 3 days a week for the whole school year. So like here I am, 2 brand new businesses trying to navigate that with like doing it on a part-time basis, basically. And so that led to a lot of late nights and a lot of stress and basically, honestly, and a lot of stuff not getting done, right? Like I had to move the goalpost a number of times to say, like, I know you wanted to have this done by this date, but the reality is that you're only one person. You're running the office space. The office space is growing. You are trying to lay out your financial planning process, but there's no roadmap for who you're trying to serve. So you're trying to create that from the ground up. And so that was what led me to like trying to fit the square peg in the round hole of like trying to fit my traditional wealth management service offering into the clients that I'm trying to serve, but they don't fit that model. So I had to learn along the way about that. And it was just kind of very interesting to see how that evolved. And it's just, again, a lot of learning. It's a lot of learning, a lot of falling in your face.
Yep.
A lot of trying again.
I love how you brought the resource back to like a person because there's systems, strategies, processes, but then you have that person that comes along, and Carolyn is, we laugh and she talk about. She said she's the fun sucker.
Fun governor.
Fun governor. At the same time, Carolyn is awesome.
She is.
Like she is. Like when she's not there, it's noticeable. Like I'll walk in on a Friday morning and be like,
Where is she? Why is it?
When she was on vacation for 2 weeks, it's very noticeable that she wasn't there. Like she is warm and like all those things. But I also love to hear your interactions where she's like, all right, you're done talking now. Like, like
I love her because she knows that I have time blindness and that she will start pacing back in front of my window.
Yep.
Like, hello, it's time. You said 30 minutes for that phone call and you're at an hour, miss. Now it's really like, it's time. But also, something else to note with Carolyn was Tiffany Turner, Tiffany Turner Baldwin is the one that introduced me.
Another guest on Coffee.
Yeah, exactly. So she was the one, she had worked with Carolyn years before. And so Carolyn was introduced to me by her, and Tiffany had already like hired her for some basic stuff with her therapy practice, right? And when I met Carolyn, I was like, man, I don't know how I'm going to afford you. Like the money is not quite here. And I wasn't sure how I was going to pull it off. But when you find the right person, you just got to run with it, right? Like, I don't know how I'm going to pull this off, but you're the right person and you're willing to come along with me on this journey. And that's really all I can ask for. So let's go. Let's do it. And I'll figure out the money part later. And the money part worked itself out, right? Like it was scary initially, but like we grew because she was there. Correct. But initially, if I would have said, nope, I have to wait till the money's here, I would have never brought her on.
You'd still be waiting right now.
And I would be burned out. I don't know that I would be in business today, to be honest. She's been with me just over a year. I mean, I probably would still be in business in some capacity, but like not with the 40 to 60% year over year growth. Not to the point of where I'm looking at like we've got not 100% capacity, but we're getting there.
Yeah.
So not 100%, but like we're growing and we're growing consistently. And now I'm like, okay, what's your next thing? What's my next thing in terms of the community?
Yep.
Which there's a whole mess there. That's a whole nother podcast.
No, that's again, it's summed up in that whole entire journey. There's so much there. There's been so much learning lessons that's led to this year where you've had that 40 to 60% growth and you're like looking at what is next, because you've had those conversations about what is next far before you had the growth.
Well, because like I want to buy a building, and this building, it's funny how this kind of comes up too, because I want to buy a building and the building has come up. It's going to be 3 years since I first saw this building, by the way, because it was during COVID. I came across this building, like, man, this is a neat building. But I'm like, it's way out of price point. No possible way. Like, I'm not even covering my rent in my current space. Like, not even happening yet, right? So I put it on the shelf. And so then fast forward a couple months later, and it's like something else has come up. Like, shoot, I need to explore that building again. So then that's come up. And so, like, again, for me, that's like the tap on the shoulder. It's like the dream I had when I said to my mother-in-law, I can see myself doing this co-working space, this collaborative workspace. Same thing. Like, the things that are meant for you won't miss you. Like, I feel like this other opportunity is something that keeps tapping me on the shoulder, and I keep putting it away, and it comes up again, and it's like, no, it's not the right time. Put it away. Oh no, here 3 months later, it's going to come up again and come up again and come up again. And oh, here's another piece that would flow into that. Here's another piece. And it's like, darn it, they're gonna make me do it, right? Like, because you can't have the whole entire vision, especially as a visionary, and then
the pieces
not
come together,
be able to act on it, right? So that's a whole nother, stay tuned, because that's a whole nother aspect of where I would like to go. It's just kind of dealing with some of the red tape and the bureaucracy to try and make it happen. And because even as the financial person, like if I can't, like the PPP is a great example. If I'm going through and doing all the research and attending all these calls on the PPP loan, the IDL loan, and all this other stuff, and if I can't get my own application through the process because you say I need to adjust my revenue, like the bank was telling me I need to adjust my revenue numbers. How? This is the number, this is the amount of money that hit my account, right?
Yeah.
And so it was so frustrating as an entrepreneur to try and navigate some of these things and not get any help. Like, I added it up. I spent 160 hours navigating this. And so, later on when I was talking to someone about the resources that were out there for business owners and why is it such a struggle for business owners to grow, especially in Livingston County. And I said, look, if I have the finance background and I know what all these things are and I know what all these numbers are, and I can't get through all of this, how do you expect an untrained business owner to get through this? And that was where I was kind of saying, like, look, if you want to make this money and grants and funding accessible to women, business owners, to entrepreneurs in this area, you got to make it accessible. You shouldn't have to have a master's degree or a doctorate in, corporate finance to be able to pull this stuff off. So that's kind of some of my other gripe is like sometimes the systems and the bureaucracy, the red tape gets in the way of growth when people are starving for that. But if you don't have deep pockets or investors, like I don't want to give up equity in my business. That's my late nights, my blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into this. It's my savings account that's gone in. So you're telling me I have to take on an investor and give them a portion of my business just to get some cash to be able to purchase a building? Doesn't make sense, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's other red tape and things that go into it. But that's part of the grit side of me is like, I'm willing to work through that and navigate that and make a stink in certain rooms because they're not paying attention or it's like, oh, we want, workforce development. We want housing. We want hybrid work. We want these other things. well, how about you take the people that are wanting to do these things that are like the grassroots bootstrapping types instead of going to the venture capitalism, the VC world. And I think that there's a disconnect there, and that's where I want to kind of expose it a little bit and also kind of make it more accessible to the people that don't want to navigate the red tape, right? Like they don't want to go through all of those things to be able to create something amazing. And so the building that I'm really excited about has the amazing opportunity to build community, increase collaboration, bring in additional workforce, give better infrastructure to the community, and all of these different things. And that's what really excites me, because for me, that impact is so much broader than me and my household.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Like that will create this amazing ripple effect that's so much bigger than me. And I don't know where that's going to take me. But like when you have something that's continuously coming up and coming up and coming up, you're like, okay, I'm going to have to do this at some point. And timing will come. Like, again, the things that are meant for you won't miss you. So when that time is there, you're going to end up seeing this amazing project. And like I said, as I lay out more stuff and I figure out what the next steps are, I'll bring it out to the public and kind of help, create something amazing. And maybe it's that I don't have all the right pieces in place yet. Maybe I don't have all the right connections yet. Maybe this podcast will help lead to that, right?
Absolutely.
Story of our life and our journey.
Yeah, no,
right?
no, that'd be amazing. But it's like you talked about having that ripple effect and that impact.
Yeah.
And you're doing that already. And just to kind of wrap this up, if it not for you, I wouldn't be sitting right here. I'd probably be back working somewhere, because you talk about that whole 2020 thing and trying to figure out as clients are getting shut down and trying to figure out how am I going to make money to where I can even just survive to market myself and try to live another day. You were really instrumental in that. But just that community, like your friendship, just coffee and grit, just from the origins. Like you've been very that ripple impact has played an impact just into my one life.
Yeah.
And I know just from the community, and you mentioned so many names, that we've had in the community for the years, like you're creating that impact. And
thank you. I think that's the rewarding part, right? Like that's the part for me that's so exciting, because I finally get to see. Now I have the benefit of hindsight. I have the benefit of being able to look at like where you and I and many of us had started, and now here I am fast forwarding 4 years and seeing how much so many of us have grown. And even the people of the space, like Nellie gave me the compliment, like, I've been with you, this is my 4th season with you now, and where you started and where you are now, like night and day difference. Like you have grown so much, but at the end of the day, I still see myself as being me, but other people around me see me growing as well. And I think I totally appreciate the compliment, because I want to be able to be that ripple effect. It's not about me. I like to hide. That's part of why I probably didn't want to do the podcast, because I'd like to be able to hide behind the background and like see all these people do these crazy, amazing things. And I don't know. Maybe it's a certain level of being humble. Maybe it's me not liking to be in the camera. But like just being able to do some of these things and seeing the impact is super rewarding for me. So thank you for going on the journey with me.
My pleasure.
I appreciate you being like my longest standing member and like going down this rabbit hole and coaching me along the way, right? Like you tell me when I'm being dumb and I need somebody to tell me when I'm being dumb, or like, well, why? And I'm like, I don't know why I'm doing this. And so you'd be like, okay, well, look at that. Okay. And so, I think those are the things that make our community great. And it's the support system. You're not an island by yourself. That's kind of where Grit and Lavender comes from. It's that passion, perseverance for very long-term goals. And the Lavender side it's the community. It's the support system. It's the people that are around you that know you're not alone. And that's kind of where Grit and Lavender comes from. It's not like so many people think I'm an herb company, but like I'm not a pot shop. I'm not an herb company. I'm not going to sell you essential oils. But like it's really, for me, it's a play on words. And it's a play on words, and it pays homage to so much of my life as well. So the people that don't know, I used to work at an excavating company, and we used to do grit stone to build and support existing roads and strengthen them. And so that was kind of paying homage to that. And it's also paying homage to like not being afraid to dive in and get your hands dirty. And like people think of like, you know, your skilled trade types, and that's also where it speaks to them too, right? But it's also that, like I said, that Angela Duckworth, passion, perseverance for very long-term goals. You need that in your finances to pay off student loan debt or buy a house or raise a family and save for your retirement. And you still need that as an entrepreneur. Like you're going to fall flat on your face. You're going to need that support system. You're going to need those people around you to help build your business and create connections. And I think the biggest thing of all of this is I really try and stay rooted in authenticity, right? Like without authenticity and being able to like show up. And if I'm in the office, like I was earlier today, no makeup on, like looking like a hot mess, like it's okay, right? Like people are like, oh yeah, Natalie's having a day. And I had a day yesterday. But you know, like sometimes those are going to happen. But like, okay, but they like as a professional, you know, that this is just my, like, you're catching me in my element for the moment, right? And when I need to show up as a professional and be there and be present for that, I'm doing that too. And it's giving us the grace of, like, showing up authentically as ourselves, creating the community that's authentic, creating a community that promotes collaboration and connection. And, you know, you can come in like a crying hot mess for the day, or you can come in like, I celebrate this, like, win that I had. And so we have all these fun and exciting things that are happening. And sometimes it's nice to just celebrate with somebody at the water cooler for a minute. And really or is. Just say like,
or just vent. We have that too.
Like, darn it. You know, like, darn this person for not paying me like they said they were going to pay me or whatever. God.
I remember there was this one meeting I had with a client. It was so frustrating, and I don't get frustrated very easy, but it was like just the tip of it. And I remember throwing my pen across the room and just being so pissed off. And I came flying out of the office, and I like unloaded to Carolyn, and I'm like, I'm so sorry.
I know,
but she like sat and listened to it the whole time.
Yeah, like, it's like Carolyn might have no idea what you're talking about, but she knows you need that, right? And sometimes it's just like, you know, especially if like you land a big deal. And you're in your own four walls by yourself. Who do you celebrate with?
Yeah.
Like, oh, yay. Okay. And then where's the serotonin and the dopamine in that when you're celebrating by yourself? Like, you have to be able to share certain things with other people. You have to be able to create that connection. They have to be able to cheer you on along the way or encourage you when you're falling down. Like, part of the reason why I can get up so often is the people around me encourage me. They say, oh, yep, that sucks. Like they validate a little bit of what I'm doing or what I'm saying. And then they see me go out in the world and try again. And like, yep, see, there she goes. She just needed a second to like get her nose rubbed in the dirt for a second. And then here she is. She's coming back up and moving forward.
And I swear this will be the wrap up, but you reminded me of like when you said, what are we going to talk about? And there's this one point, and I remember it was, you know, probably October, November, you know, very early into opening, and you were in a networking group, and somebody told you that, you know, this you might want to, when you're going to face reality and realize that you're probably before your time, and you know, it's not, you know, you're going to have to close up. And I remember being so pissed off. It was February.
It was February of 2020 that they said, like, maybe this isn't going to work out. Maybe you need to do something different. Maybe you just need to go back to doing financial planning and forget this whole like.
I just still makes my blood boil. I remember like being there, and I don't know this person. I probably, if you said their name, I probably would know them, but I don't really know them. I don't know who it was, but I remember being so enraged and so pissed off and be like, screw them. You're going to make this work. We're going to make this work because of them.
Well, and I think, you know, that sometimes lights its fire all by itself. Like, tell me I can't do something.
Yeah.
I dare you. Tell me I can't do something and watch me say, I'm going to do it. Right. And so, because I feel like if there's something that is worth doing, it's worth doing well. But the reality is that in order to do it well, you're going to have to learn a lot along the way. And I feel like the more that I'm doing things, the more I'm learning, the more I'm failing, the more I'm learning. And again, having faith that like everything happens for a reason, and what's meant for me won't miss me. And so if this crazy opportunity in the business is what's supposed to be meant for me, like that'll work out. If something else is meant for me, that's going to work out. And then also for me, like, thank God for the support system. It's the people, you guys that are as part of the community, but it's also my husband, it's my mother-in-law, it's all the people that are around me that are supporting me day in, day out. My mom's been on the phone with me for hours until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning talking about business strategy and sales strategy and all this. And like, without everybody around me, this isn't possible, right? Because so appreciate all those people.
I'm forgetting his name right now, but I know he spent so much time with you. He always like does stuff for you, especially at the beginning. Rajiv, yes.
Yeah, Rajiv. Like Rajiv has got the title of my operations specialist, right? But it is a volunteer position.
And you've just been there through so much.
Yeah, well, and Rajiv is family, right? Yeah. But he is somebody that like takes the bull by the horns, and like when I don't want to be a bulldog, he's happy to step in and be my bulldog for me a little bit, and also say like, no, this is dumb, right? Like, and you deserve better, instead of me just kind of taking it a little bit. And so Rajiv has been an amazing supporter for me. And even though he's family, like he is not obligated to be that supporter of me, especially in a volunteer position. Like, you know, I think sometimes you see the people that you love and you care about and you're like, I have the skill set, I can help you. Let me just help you.
Yeah.
Because it will make a big impact. And then you can show up to be this amazing person that I see you being. And sometimes we forget that the people around us see us in some like amazing person, and we don't always see that in ourselves. So it's a nice reminder to like tap into the resources that are around you, like our community. There's plenty of resources. Like I asked a bunch of our members today for some resources for some tough conversations I had yesterday, right? And so having that community, like I wasn't stressed about my tough conversations yesterday because I knew I had 3 therapists that I could touch today and find out how to work through whatever issue is coming up. And that's amazing. Like tapping into the resources. We have the community that's there. We have the people that are around us. We just have to be able to ask for help. We don't have to go this stuff alone, and ask for the help, ask for the support, ask for, you know, if somebody's coming in, like I'm struggling. I have a 10% close rate, and Jason, help me help myself. Like, I don't know, like I think I'm doing everything right. Everybody else's close rate's much higher. What am I messing up? Right.
Yeah.
And just being able to ask for help and ask that community of like, you want the honest truth or you want the like, blow smoke truth, right? Like, no, people want, in our community, I think people want the honest truth. They want to know what can make them better, even if it's tough to hear. So thank you for this.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming down. That's just a great final note, is that it takes that community. I think it's been the not redundant, the message throughout. 1, the community, and 2, what is meant for you won't miss you.
Yeah.
And 3, that you're either winning or learning. You're constantly learning. But we talk about that community. It's so important. You've mentioned that, you know, find and build those people that you've mentioned the different people and how they've played roles. And just lastly, before we end, you've mentioned it several times, but shout out to Doug, because that guy kicks ass, like literally in jiu-jitsu and all that stuff. But like, I've seen him do so many and serve so many different roles, whether he's hanging up the boards or like putting together the furniture, or like I've saw him like cleaning the carpets and like, whatever he's needed to do, to support your passion. I've seen him do it. And so
you guys only get to see a glimpse of that. He does so much more at home. And so I need to make a shrine for Doug. He's technically our maintenance guy, right? Like he's submit a maintenance request to Doug, and it's done. It's amazing. Done. Like you just send him a request and all of a sudden it's done. He pops up, he fixes it, and it's done.
Always with a smile.
Always.
He might complain verbally, but he always has a smile on his face.
He might complain with a smile. No, but he's the rock. He's the one that supports me through all the things. And man, next year will be 20 years that we've been together. So he is somebody that I've been able to grow with throughout my adult life. And I think finding, like you and Gracie, you guys have been together for a long time, and finding those partners that you can grow with is so important. And so I am so incredibly thankful for him and all the support. And thank you for having me on the podcast today. And
thank you for finally.
We're not making it 4 years till I do another one.
You should have been episode number 1 instead. You're like 114 or something, 115.
Well,
I don't know.
We just needed to hit our 4-year anniversary to get there. So.
Absolutely. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.